Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Dan's Models. This is John with
Dan.
And this is an HO scale model,
Uh-huh.
and it looks really cool. What is it?
This is a Santa Fe GP50. In fact, this is the GP50 that I've been talking about for the last God knows how many years on the podcast.
Well, we've been doing the podcasts for about 5 years now, so it could be as many as 5 years, Dan.
Yeah, I think, actually, I don't know if it was our first episode, because I've actually gone back and been sort of listening to some of our old podcasts, and I know in the second episode I specifically talked about this locomotive, that I was working on it at that time, and that was 2010.
So it has been 5 years.
Yeah. Well, it was on the back burner for a long time.
Yeah.
This is an Athearn Blue Box GP50 that had kind of a long story behind it. I bought this thing probably in the 80s, and it was painted for Santa Fe, but it was a typical blue box, not very detailed, and so at some point I stripped that paint off, and I got I think it was Smoky Valley sold a GP60 dynamic brake. And it used to be, if you wanted a GP60, you basically had to use a GP50 and swap some parts.
Yeah, you had mentioned that before, too.
Yeah, so I had actually painted this one and did that and redetailed it and painted it as a cotton belt GP60. So it was in Southern Pacific colors. But then some years later, Proto 2000 came out with their GP60 models, and I ended up getting a deal on 3 of those on eBay, and they're much better GP60 models, because the GP50 really isn't the same as a GP60. Even, I mean, aside from the dynamic brake, there's other differences. So it really wasn't a very accurate model. And once I got the Protos, which are much better GP60s, I didn't really like this one as much anymore. So, of course not, because I'm me. So I was wondering what to do with it, and I thought, well, why not turn it back into a Santa Fe GP50? That's how it started. But, of course, I wouldn't just put it back as a stock blue box. I wanted to detail it.
Well, right. I mean, especially if you've already done all that work to it, right?
Right. Yeah. So this one actually was pretty extensively modified. Not only did I use a Canon cab and subbase and short hood like I usually do, but there's also some Canon doors on it, because some of the doors weren't in the right places. And the rear hood is actually Canon part too, the very back here. And I swapped that out, so it was a lot of cutting. Also, the step wells weren't correct, so I cut those out, and I made those with some Railflyer step wells, which I don't think are available anymore because Railflyer went out of business. But I'd done all that, and I'd also used some photo etched walkway tread and other things. What held me up was the Q fans, because when I first started this model, I wasn't aware of anybody that made some decent Q fans. And I originally thought the molded ones that were on there, they weren't see-through, but they were actually not badly done. So I was originally thinking I might just leave those. But then Railflyer announced that they were going to make some photo etch Q fans, and I was waiting for those. And then, of course, Railflyer went out of business. So those never happened. But then I discovered that Detail Associates made some plastic see-through Q fans, and those are now, I believe, discontinued, but I managed to get some.
Wow.
And I ended up using those on it, and that was kind of the last thing, and that kind of got the project going again, because this engine had been sitting kind of off to the side in my the area where I work for probably 4 or 5 years, just sitting there, half done.
Yeah. I probably saw it there and didn't even realize what it was.
Yeah, it was there collecting dust for years.
Yeah.
I'd also done some things like I custom made the antenna plane here, this part and this one, because actually I think it's a Detail West makes a photo etch thing to make these now, but I didn't have that. That either wasn't available when I did this, or I didn't know about it. So I made my own for this one. So there's a lot of custom work in this thing. The trucks have sanders on them on the inboard side, and brake lines and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I did a lot of detailing.
I know that's the kind of thing you usually have to add to these.
Yeah. So and of course, since I started this, Athearn has come out with their Genesis GP50, which is a much better model to begin with, and has a lot of the stuff that I did on this one already done for you.
Have you ever done a side-by-side comparison with one of those sort of stock and look at yours and see which ones?
I don't have a Santa Fe Genesis GP50. I have a CNW one, but
Are they different enough that it wouldn't be a good comparison?
Well, I have it here. You want to try it?
Oh, bring it out. Let's look at it.
This is a Chicago Northwestern GP50. This isn't really a straight-up comparison because, one, it's two different railroads, and there's a lot of railroad-specific details that are different.
Right.
And two, the CNW unit is actually an earlier production GP50, whereas I modified the Santa Fe one to be a late production GP50.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I think this was Santa Fe's last GP50, 3854, was the highest numbered one at any rate. So if they were produced in numerical order, then it was their last GP50.
Right.
You know, by the time I got done with this one, it's fairly similar. You know, it's got same like freestanding grab irons and you know, see-through fans. Although actually, this is a Canon fan, the dynamic brake fan, and I actually like that better than the Genesis fan on this one.
Yeah, they both look pretty good though. Yeah,
but I don't like the hub is silver on here, and I don't know if they're like that, but they don't probably stay like that for more than 5 minutes. So, I like the Canon ones because they have a separate hub, so you can actually paint them.
Yeah.
And the Q fans, honestly, I'm not sure that these look as good as these either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's they're both good models, but there are some differences.
Yeah.
So I built this one to represent the 3854 as it would have appeared in the mid 90s. So it's got the lowered headlight and ditch lights. They were built, I think, with a beacon and the headlight on top because they were built in the 80s. But the Santa Fe changed all that after a time. So
yeah, did they plate over that? Is that what that top gray part is?
Yeah. There's a cover plate there, and the number boards are they can be independently lit and
as usual.
Lights.
Yeah,
and of course the headlight.
What kind of LEDs did you use? Are those the surface mount?
The surface
inside
mount,
a casting.
In the ditch lights, is surface mount LEDs that are mounted inside the castings, so that there's no wires sticking out anywhere.
Yeah. Did you make the little lens for it too?
Yeah.
The fiber optic lens.
Lens. Pretty much the same way I do it always. And the number boards are lit by a pair of surface mount LEDs mounted on a little box under here. The box is actually about this deep, and the LEDs are mounted on the back. Right. And I used a 2K ohm resistor on those so that they're fairly dim, because I don't want them to be. Number boards don't need to be really bright. They should
they never are
on
rail trains. Yeah.
So, and the box actually has. Before I do this, I paint the top, the inside of the cab on top. I paint it black. Right. So the box is kind of like it's got three sides, two sides and a back, and then it also has a bottom on it. Right. And I paint the inside of the box black also. So what the reason for that is to contain any light from the LEDs, so it's only shining out through the number boards
where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and I made it the same size. Basically, it's more or less the same depth as this top piece up here, so that when you push it up against the front, it kind of completes the box, so it contains all the light, and that way the light just goes through the number boards and doesn't come out anywhere else.
Yeah, just like you demonstrate on the how-to videos that we have out there. That's in weathering and detailing locomotives.
Yeah, I talk a lot about how I do my lighting. This engine is pretty standard for me in terms of that. It's the same deal I've done.
That's how I figured you had used the surface mount LEDs with the fiber optic lens on the ditch lights. So it's a light box in the top, which I've seen many times as well. Yeah. I should mention that if anybody watching is interested to see how Dan does all this stuff, it's pretty cool. And he makes speaker enclosures kind of the same way, but without the painting everything black. You should check those out in the weathering and detailing videos that we have out. They're very thorough, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you picked up on the techniques of these things, but the results are awesome.
Some of it it seemed like a logical way to do it. Yeah, because you need to mount LEDs have to be mounted on something. Right. And, I don't like it when you have light shining in places where you don't want to, Same thing with, there's an LED. It's a 3mm LED mounted in the nose, which makes these lights work. And I had to put some shrink tubing around it and also some silicone sealant so that the light wouldn't shine down through the bottom of the train.
Yeah.
For the same reason.
Yeah, it's just like what we see on those videos. It's really good.
I think that looks hokey when that happens.
Well, it looks like a toy.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen a train on a railroad where the headlight is making lights come out the bottom of the thing.
Now trains usually do have, which is one thing I've never modeled, but they do have step lights and stuff. There's a limit on how much stuff I want to try to cram into this model.
They also have spinning fans, working windshield wipers, and little guys inside that can blink and move and stuff. Yeah. So, I mean,
there's a lot of things. Yeah. So another thing I did on this model was it originally had the old style blower bulge, which is the more rounded one. And so I got this cannon part for the angled newer style, and I basically cut a big hole in the side of the model and put the new thing in there. Also, I had to custom make these long stanchions.
Okay.
Because nobody makes those. So the handrails are all made out of brass wire and precision scale stanchions. And what I actually did was I took 4 precision scale stanchions and cut them in half and then soldered them back together with a little piece of brass on the back as a reinforcement.
Okay.
And so I basically used 2 to make one, so I could make a long one.
It worked.
Yeah, it was kind of a pain, but at least there's only 2 of them.
Well, right, but here's the other thing, though. It sounds to me like almost everything about this model was kind of a pain, so it's just another pain in a long list of pains, you know?
So this is like the engine that's taken me a really long time to
make. This is what they mean when they say he went to painstaking lengths to create the detail, right?
Right. I think this is actually the first model that I've tried the high-tech hoses on, the MU hoses, which are they're actually, I don't know if you can see this, but they're actually flexible.
Yeah, you can't really see your fingers in the way.
Yeah.
I believe you.
They're made out of rubber or something like that, and
right on.
They look, well, for one thing, they're already black, so you don't really have to paint the black part. They're also flexible, so that if you touch them, they're not going to break off. So that's kind of a neat thing, and they seem to work pretty well. They're just as easy to install as the more rigid kind that you can get. So I probably will be using more of those in the future.
Yeah, it looks good.
And I also, like I said before, the rear of the long hood is a cannon piece also. So I basically had to cut the whole rear end of the engine out and then graft this piece onto it. And the reason I did that is because the original body had, I think it had number board openings, and this particular unit had nothing back there. So sometimes I have to fill those in, but this time I decided to try using the cannon part.
Well, it looks good.
Yeah, it worked out. I mean, it was a little bit of a pain, especially up the top, because the top up here is still the stock shell. So I had to blend it in and putty and fill it and all that.
Wow.
And the sides I kind of got away with because the seam was right on the paint separation. So the yellow is the cannon part and the blue is the original. So you can't really tell that there's a seam there because it's color anyway. But anyways, there's a lot of cutting and fussing with this model. So this model has kind of become my usual. It has a Loxone Select DCC sound decoder, and it's got a 4-ohm rectangular speaker mounted back in the radiator area. So I'm going to fire it up. Has a long startup sequence, this one.
Well, it's another job well done.
Oh, thanks.
So anyway, I guess that'll do it for this edition. We'll be back next time.
Yeah, see you later.